Hello everyone, my name is Ian. You're watching Big Rock Moto. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Now, one of the questions that I get asked very frequently is, look, I am new to the adventure riding segment, or maybe I'm new to motorcycling in general, and I want to get an adventure bike for my first bike. What kind of motorcycles, what kind of adventure bikes should I be looking at for that first adventure bike or for that beginner level adventure riding? So here's what I've got for you today. I've compiled 7 of the best new beginner adventure bikes that you can buy today. Now, a couple things before I go any further into the video. I'm in the USA, so this is only including models that we can get here in the USA. There might be models overseas that some of you can get that we cannot get here, so unfortunately I'm not able to include those. The other thing is I'm not looking at used motorcycles, so I will have separate videos, and I do have separate videos about what are the best used adventure bikes to buy. But for this video, I want to think about somebody going into the dealership showroom and shopping these new bikes. So we're looking at a new purchase here. So we really should define what is an adventure bike. Well, you're free to have your own opinions for that, and that's fine. But for me, I look at an adventure motorcycle as a bike that's going to be able to be comfortable for taking longer journeys, but also still be able to go off-road. So that's really about it, and that's how I define adventure bikes. Now, in one of my last videos, I talked about what are some different classes of adventure motorcycles, so trying to divide them up. And what I propose is small adventure bikes 0 to 500 cc, mid-size adventure bikes 500 to 1000, and full-size or large ADVs would be 1000 cc and up. Now, you could argue that maybe it should be classified by weight instead. That's fine, that could be, but I'm just trying to give us a framework to go forward from. Now, for a beginner adventure bike, we're only going to be looking at the mid-size or the small adventure bikes. We're definitely not going to be looking at any of those big full-size adventure bikes for beginners. One question you need to ask before going any further is, are you brand new to adventure riding, or are you new to motorcycling in general? And the other thing I would say is that, and I mentioned this in one of my last videos that I filmed, was that if you're new to off-road riding, to riding in the dirt or off the highway, an adventure bike is really not the best way to learn that. All the best dirt riders in the world, all the people who are able to ride dirt bikes really well or ride adventure bikes really well, they all started riding dirt on dirt bikes or lightweight dual sport bikes. It's simply impossible to get on a big, heavy, tall adventure bike and learn to master off-road riding. Well, I shouldn't say it's impossible, but it's much harder to do it that way. So if you can, I recommend starting your off-road riding career on a lighter weight dirt bike or dual sport bike. So what makes a good beginner adventure bike? So the first thing is it can't be something too big and it can't be something too heavy. It also needs to have a relatively low seat height. Now, a note here on the seat height. If you think about what a motorcycle manufacturer is up against here when designing an adventure bike with a lower seat height, how are they supposed to have a long travel suspension for absorbing off-road terrain, fit the airbox and the exhaust and the engine all underneath the seat, still have a lot of ground clearance under the skid plate, and somehow give you a low seat height? That's just physically not possible unless they slam the whole motorcycle down to the ground, but then it wouldn't be a good adventure bike. So that's why you see so many adventure bikes with seat heights above 33, 34, 35 inches. That's very challenging for a lot of riders who might not be, 5 foot 10 inches and taller like myself. So I get that, I really do. I've talked to a lot of shorter riders, a lot of women riders who are just frustrated by these tall adventure motorcycles, and I really do get it. So I've tried to look at that here real closely in these bikes I've chosen. The next thing is the motorcycle needs to have low to moderate power. So you don't need a lot of power, you don't want a lot of power for learning adventure riding. The other thing is not too expensive. So I think the most expensive bike in my test is like $10,000 US brand new. So I've tried to keep it below that mark. Some questions also before we go any further. One, how tall are you? So what kind of seat height can you tolerate? So what I recommend is going down to the dealership and sitting on some different bikes, seeing what you're comfortable with, and then asking what the seat height is, or looking up what the seat height is on that bike. So you have a baseline. You can know, okay, 34 inches is too tall for me. I need like 32-inch seat height or something like that. The other thing you need to ask yourself before you purchase your first adventure bike is, are you going to be riding mostly off-road or mostly on-road, or is it going to be like a true 50-50 split? So as you're going to see in a minute, some of the bikes I've chosen are more off-road biased and some are more on-road biased. So you really have to be really honest with yourself, and it's okay if you're riding mostly on the highway. That's true for most adventure riding, and that's fine. You don't have to apologize for that. Street riding is great, but just be honest about how much off-road versus on-road you're going to do. All right, so I promise we're almost there getting into these 7 bikes, but before I go any further, if you're new to the channel, first of all, welcome. If you are new, please hit the subscribe button and hit the bell. I really would appreciate that. And whether you're new or returning, there's a few ways you can support the work I'm doing here. If you like the work I'm doing here, you can leave a comment, always leave a thumbs up. There's a few ways you can also help make this channel more financially sustainable going into the future as an independent motorcycle channel. You can please, when you're shopping for riding gear, tools, parts, tires, accessories, all that kind of stuff, please shop at Rocky Mountain or REVZILLA, and the links for those are below in all my video descriptions, and I usually put it in a pinned comment as well. Now there's also Patreon, and there's also merchandise that you can buy with my logos on it. That also helps me as well. I'm going to put a list of all the Patreons right here on the screen, and thank you so much to those of you who are supporting the channel in this way. It means the world to me. If you want to become a supporter of Big Rock Moto, there's a link below to do that. Okay, so let's get into these 7 motorcycles. So the first motorcycle that I've chosen for a beginner adventure bike, and you know, this might not even be just for beginners. This might be for more experienced riders who are just sick of the super heavy, super overpowered, expensive adventure bikes. So this is the KTM 390 Adventure. So this bike comes in at $6,700 US, which I think is a heck of a bargain for what you're getting. So you're getting a single cylinder engine, you're getting around 42 horsepower or around 31 kilowatts. The bike is relatively lightweight. It comes in at 387 pounds or about 176 kilos. So going below that 400-pound mark on a bike that you can legitimately travel on and do adventure riding on is very, very nice and very, very important for many of you based on the comments that I see from you all the time. The bike also has a relatively friendly 33.7-inch seat height. I mean, I wish it was lower. It'd be nice to have 32-inch seat height. But again, go to your dealer and sit on it and see how that's going to feel for you. There are low seats available, perhaps from KTM, but definitely also in the aftermarket with companies like Seat Concepts. So what are the pros and cons to this bike? So the pros of the KTM 390 Adventure, I think definitely are that lightweight coming in at under 400 pounds. The good suspension that this bike has, it's KTM, so they really focus on having a good level of performance from their suspension components. You also get around 7 inches of travel with that suspension. So that's really, really nice. The other thing I didn't write here on the list is that it's going to be very, very fun to ride. KTM is known for making engaging, characterful, exciting, playful motorcycles. That's what they believe in as a company, and it comes through in all of their products. So those are the pros to it. Now the cons, well, it is a single cylinder motorcycle. So for those of you who might not be as experienced with talking about that kind of thing, a single cylinder is going to have one piston going up and down in the engine, and no matter what they do with counterbalancers or things to quell that, there's going to be some vibration and some buzzing that comes through the handlebars. It doesn't seem to be a huge problem with a modern single like this bike, but it's not a twin cylinder. It's not going to be as smooth as a twin cylinder or multi-cylinder bike, so you just have to check your expectations there. The other downside that some people have kind of talked about with the 390 is just that it doesn't quite have an off-road wheel set from a purist point of view. So it's using cast wheels, and it's using a 19-inch front and a 17-inch back wheel instead of like a more friendly 21-inch front wheel. Now, I don't think that's a huge deal. I don't think that should sway people away from it, but it's just something to keep in mind that if you bash the rims really, really hard, you could potentially dent them. So the second bike on my list of best beginner adventure bikes is the Honda CB500X. Now, I reviewed this bike a few months ago, and a lot of you have seen that video. It became very popular on YouTube. I really, really have a soft spot for the CB500X. I think it's like it's not a unicorn motorcycle. I don't want to use that term. But it's a sweet spot between the larger bikes and the smaller bikes. It's super comfortable, it has enough power, it's smooth, it's well made, and it comes in at the right price. So what are we talking about? So we're looking at around $7,000 US. We're looking at about 50 horsepower or 37 kilowatts. It's 434 pounds or 197 kilos. So it still comes in that 200 kilo mark. but it is, you know, maybe not as light as some people would like. But I will tell you, after spending about, I think 5 or 6 weeks with that bike, it doesn't feel heavy. It feels a lot lighter than something like a Tenere 700, which is also a bike that I own. So the seat height on the Honda is 32.8 inches or 833 millimeters. So that's pretty friendly. And I can definitely testify that it's pretty easy to reach the ground on this bike. So what are the pros and cons to the CB500X? The pros would be that it's a smooth motor. It's a twin cylinder, so you don't get the single cylinder vibrations coming through. It's really good for long distance riding or touring. I told this story in my review, but when I did my first ride on this bike, I was just gonna go out for a couple hours, and I ended up riding all day because I was having so much fun and I was so comfortable on the bike. It just has the comfort of a larger motorcycle, and that's something I really appreciate about it. So for long distance trips, it's great. It's got a long fuel range, it's got a comfortable seat, it's got good wind protection, so it's really good at taking longer journeys. The other pro, of course, is the Honda reliability, and it's really hard to argue that. Now, what are the cons to the CB500X? There definitely are some. The motorcycle overall is not super well designed for tackling rough trails. Now, there are upgrade kits that some people talk about, like Rally Raid, but that gets into a lot of money. But what I mean is that the suspension is a pretty short travel, so it's not going to be able to cope with really large hits on the trail, and it's not going to be able to absorb the trail as well as a longer travel bike would. Also, the ground clearance is a bit lacking, and you can even see in this photo that I'm using here that the exhaust is pretty exposed down under there, so you're going to keep that in mind, and you're going to want a good skid plate on this bike if you buy it and plan to take it off-road. Now, of course, no list of beginner adventure motorcycles or good value adventure motorcycles would be complete without the Royal Enfield Himalayan. Now, I love the Himalayan. I've ridden a few of them. I absolutely adore this motorcycle, and I've really come close to buying one just because I have so much fun with it. So the Himalayan comes in at $5,000 US. That is crazy. Crazy pricing for a brand new motorcycle that can go anywhere. It's very impressive. Now, the power is a little bit lacking. It's only 24 horsepower or around 18 kilowatts, although it doesn't prevent people from riding it around the world. It's also not lightweight. This bike weighs right around 200 kilos or around 439 pounds. So it's not light, but because it's low to the ground, it really doesn't feel that heavy. And speaking of low to the ground, it's only a 31.5-inch seat height. That is super, super impressive. So for those of you who are like, 5.5 feet tall or 5'2" or whatever it might be, this is one of those bikes that you really need to have a look at and sit on and try to get a test ride, because the seat height is very, very friendly for just about anybody, and that's a rare thing for an adventure motorcycle. So what are the pros to the Royal Enfield Himalayan? Well, I just talked about the low seat height. I also think the character and the styling and the nostalgia that this bike evokes, and sort of the history of the Royal Enfield name, and that's going to mean different things to different people, but it's especially popular in certain countries around the world. So I think that's a really big part. It looks the part. You're going to get a lot of cool conversations about it when you park it at the cafe, and I really love it. The other pro, of course, we talked about is the price. There's really nothing that approaches this much capability for that price, brand new. It's really hard to touch that. Now, what are the cons? There definitely are cons to the Himalayan. The power to weight ratio is really, really bad. So what I mean is that if you look at how much horsepower and torque it produces for the amount of weight that it's carrying, it's slow. Like, it's really, really slow. Like, you're going to get outrun by minivans at the stoplight carrying 7 kids to soccer practice type of slow, okay? Now, that's not a problem for a lot of people. It's fine. You just have to know that that's what you're getting into. So it's not going to be fast. The other con to the Himalayan is that if you live, like where I live in the western United States, we have these highways that are 80-mile-per-hour speed limits, and trying to go 80 to 90 is not happening on the Royal Enfield. You might go 80, 85 miles an hour with the wind at your back downhill after the bike's been dropped out of an aircraft, but for the most part, I mean, you're going to be cruising 65 to 70 is going to be where you're comfortable cruising. It does have some wind protection. It's relatively comfortable, but it's not a high-speed cruiser. So if that's something you need, depending on where you live, then you really have to factor that one in. Okay, so next on my list is a motorcycle that so many of you asked me questions about, and unfortunately I have not been able to get a ride on, although I am sending an email today to my Kawasaki rep, my media rep, to try to get one of these as a test bike to do a review on, because it has a lot of interest, and based on the specs I'm about to show you, it is an extremely interesting bike. So let's look at this. So the Versys X300 comes in at $6,100 US, putting it below something like their own KLR650. Now I should mention that ABS is standard for 2022, whereas in previous years, at least in the USA, it was an optional extra. This motorcycle, despite being a pretty small engine, actually makes almost 40 horsepower or 29 kilowatts, and it does that because it revs to 1 million RPM. Now looking at the weight of the Versys, it's below that nice 400-pound mark. It's around 175 kilos or 385 pounds, which makes it, let's see, about 80 pounds lighter than a KLR650. Let me repeat that. The Versys X300 is 80 pounds lighter than a KLR650, but it has a twin-cylinder motor. What is going on? Like, it doesn't sound right, does it? Well, I mean, there's some compromises with this bike. It's a small engine, it has a lower suspension. There's some things going on, but still, I think that weight is really, really impressive. The seat height of this bike is also really, really low. So whereas their KLR650 comes in at over 34 inches, this comes in at only 32 inches or 815 millimeters. That's really, really nice. So what are the pros to the Versys X300? Well, it's a twin-cylinder bike, so it's not going to have a lot of vibration. The engine does rev to approximately 1 million RPM because it's a tiny engine, but it doesn't have much vibration based on what riders have reported. The relatively lightweight, at least for an adventure bike. Also the long fuel range. So this bike has a really nice big fuel tank, and you can ride a long distance without having to worry about getting gas. What are the cons of the Versys X300? Well, there are a few, and I think Ryan, when he did his video of this bike, he touched on some of these. The engine is a small motor. Even though it's a twin, it's a small displacement. It's got two little pistons moving about that much. It doesn't have a lot of torque. So if you're someone who likes that shove feeling in your back of the torque of an engine, this is not that. It also has an ABS system that's non-defeatable. Much like the KLR, which everybody's complaining about, there's no button to turn off the ABS. Now, I will tell you that if you're someone who takes some initiative and is a little bit of a DIYer, you can either pull the fuse, or better, you can wire in a switch to that circuit on your handlebar and just turn it off whenever you want. That's what I've done on motorcycles that I've personally owned that had non-defeatable ABS. I just found the ABS circuit, wired in a switch to it, and I could turn it off myself, and that was easy. The other con to the Versys is it does have limited suspension travel and limited ground clearance. So, you're not going to be going out and like rocking through the Rubicon Trail or, some crazy off-road terrain. You can do a lot of off-roading with it, but kind of like I mentioned with the Honda CB500X, it's not a dirt bike, it's not a dual sport bike, so it's really low slung to the ground. It doesn't have the big off-road wheels, it doesn't have a big suspension, so it's more like gentle off-roading and just be careful with it. But overall, I think this Versys is a very, very compelling bike. All right, now some of you probably weren't expecting this, but one of the motorcycles that I often recommend to people getting into adventure riding, and this might be more for somebody who has some street riding experience or motorcycle riding experience already, but wants to do a little bit of off-roading, and somebody who's looking for an easy-to-ride bike that's low to the ground. So here's why the F750 GS is so awesome and why I'm such a huge fan of it. The base price is $9,999 US. Now, it is a BMW, so they have option packages that most of them have. They're going to push that price over that $10,000 mark. So I don't want to say it's deceptive marketing, but it's a little bit misleading when they quote that base price. It comes in at 77 horsepower or 57 kilowatts, so plenty of power for anything you'd ever want to do. It is the 850 GS motor. It's just detuned to that lower amount of horsepower. So that kind of makes some people frustrated, but that's just what they're doing. Now the weight is a little bit, some of you are going to really complain about this. It's 490 pounds or 224 kilograms. So, I mean, keep in mind, yes, that is pretty heavy, but it is a full-featured like touring motorcycle with a big twin-cylinder motor, so it's not going to be lightweight. The seat height comes in at 32 inches or 815 millimeters, but there's a big but here. BMW is one of the few companies that really caters to shorter riders. So what they can do is lower the suspension of the bike and do it properly so that it maintains its handling. They can also give you a low or an extra low seat, which can bring this down to a 30-inch seat height. That's 1.5 inches lower than the Royal Enfield Himalayan that I just talked about a few slides ago. So Really, really amazing what you can get there. I personally know a lot of women who like to choose this bike for adventure touring. Again, just because you can get nice and low and it doesn't feel too intimidating. So what are the pros to the BMW 750 GS? Powerful engine, a lot of power, a lot of torque. The other thing with BMW that people don't give them enough credit for is that they have the best motorcycle warranty in the business. It's a 3-year, 36,000 mile warranty. Who else gives you that? That's really, really good. Most companies are like 1 year, something like that. Also, BMW has really, really good financing promotion. So for most people, and I know here we're going to have the Dave Ramsey people saying you can only pay cash, which I totally disagree with. But anyway, they have really good financing rates, and they have something called the Easy Ride program, which is like a balloon loan, which you can do if you know what you're doing, and it gets that payment really, really low. So you could drive away or ride away with one of these bikes for like $150 a month or $180 a month US dollars without putting too much down. I mean, how could you say no to that? It's such a good deal. Also, the comfort and technology, you've got a TFT dash, you've got BMW, so it's really good for touring. It's got a lot of safety tech on it. Great motorcycle for that. The cons, we already mentioned it. It's still a heavy motorcycle. It's not lightweight by any standard. Now, I know some of you have been sitting on pins and needles waiting for this announcement, but yes, the KLR650, the 2022, is on this list. Now, it just wouldn't be a list of good entry-level adventure bikes without the KLR. Now, I know that some of you in other countries don't get this bike, but that's a shame because it's a pretty awesome motorcycle. I was about to say little motorcycle, but it's not little at all. It's actually pretty big. So the Kawasaki KLR in the US, it comes in at a base price of $6,700. You can get the higher level trims and the ABS, and that adds a little bit more. I've done a lot of videos on the new KLR. I had a press bike for like 6 weeks, so I did a lot of content with it, and I'll link that here if you want to go look at it. So it's a single cylinder engine. It makes 40 horsepower, but it makes a lot of torque. That's 30 kilowatts, by the way. The weight. So the weight is a subject of a lot of kind of hatred from a lot of people. So it's 456 pounds. It's 207 kilograms. So it's not lightweight, but it doesn't feel that heavy. It feels lighter than a Tenere 700. It's easier to pick up than a Tenere 700, even though it weighs the same. And I know this because I did this side to side or side by side in my driveway. So the bike also does not have a super low seat. It's got a 34.3 inch seat height or 870 millimeters. So if the bike is heavy, it doesn't really have a low seat. Why is this on this list? Well, it's on here because it's an amazing value and it's incredibly capable. It has a lot of carrying capacity. It's extremely comfortable. It has incredible wind protection. It has a comfortable seat, a huge fuel tank. You can go anywhere on it. And for someone who has some riding experience already, or maybe if you're a larger, taller person without a lot of riding experience, you're going to love this bike. Now, it's not for really, really short people or people who are brand new to off-road riding. It's pretty big. But I will say that when you go off-road, it feels more like a giant dual sport than an adventure bike. I hope that's going to make sense to some of you. But what I mean is that it doesn't feel too intimidating to ride, which Kawasaki did a really good job keeping it that way. So what are the pros to the KLR? Well, the price is really, really attractive. Also, another pro is it's really good off-road. Like, it absorbs the trail super, super well. You can hit stuff, you can go through dips. I mean, the suspension is soft, but it's very comfortable. It's not going to be for somebody who wants to race through the desert, but it's really, really good for most people. It also has the really off-road friendly wheel and tires, 21-inch front, 17-inch back with spokes, so you can hit stuff. You've got the good rollover of the 21-inch front wheel, so that's something really, really good. I also mentioned the long fuel range. 6 gallons at 60 miles a gallon or 55 miles a gallon is almost 300 miles between fuel stops. That's incredible. Now, what are the cons to the KLR? It's heavy and it's slow. Just like I talked about with the Royal Enfield Himalayan, the power to weight ratio is bad. So it just has very steady acceleration. It has like a smooth flow of torque, but you can't go fast. You don't get any thrill from accelerating the bike. Also, the whole bike just feels a bit old-fashioned. Some of you love that and some of you hate that. Personally, I like it. I really actually do like it. But you do have some vibration from the single cylinder. Although for a single, it's one of the smoothest single cylinders out there. They did a really good job of dampening the vibration. They've got rubber-mounted handlebars, rubber-mounted foot pegs. Again, you can watch my videos for all those details, but I really, really like the KLR. But if you're someone shorter, a smaller person, or really new to off-road riding, then it's going to be a bit too much bike for you. So I've got another BMW on the list, and this is also a bike that people bring up all the time, asking me questions about or commenting on my videos. This is the BMW G310 GS. This is a really interesting little motorcycle. So what are the specs here? We've got 34 horsepower, 25 kilowatts. We've got 386 pounds, so well below that 200 kilogram mark, 175 kilos. That's very nice, very nice low weight. For reference, that's over 100 pounds less than an F750 GS that I talked about a couple of minutes ago. You've got a 32.8-inch seat height, so again, that's nice and low. And being a BMW, they probably have options to get that even lower for you. So what are the pros to the G310 GS? The lightweight, we've already talked about the BMW warranty, which is really competitive, really good warranty for peace of mind. You've got the BMW financing options. Also some other things that I don't list here, but BMW Fit and Finish, BMW Longevity, which they're really famous for. I know now there's going to be jokes about the final drive failures and things like that, but seriously though, BMWs are pretty well built in my experience. I've owned a lot of them. Also the low seat height is really good. Also, I think the styling, I think they look really cool, especially this rally one that I have a picture of here. What are the cons of the G310 GS? So I know some people who have them. I've talked to them about the bike. The highway ability, those higher speeds like above 70 miles per hour or above 110 kilometers per hour, it's a bit buzzy, it's a bit strained. I mean, it's a small single-cylinder motor, so there's some horsepower there, but you're going to have to really wring the engine's neck, and it's not going to be super comfortable for sustained speeds above that 70 mile per hour or 110 kph area. The other thing is that just like some of the other bikes in this list, you've got cast wheels, and you've also got, smaller wheels, so it's a 19-17-inch combo. So it's not going to be the most tough or the best for rollover on really rough trails. But again, we're talking about beginner adventure bikes. You're not going to go, it's racing through the desert on this thing. It's not made for that. It's made for people to enter the adventure segment. And I think BMW hit all the goals with this bike. So that's it. Those are my 7 bikes that I'm recommending in 2022 for beginner adventure motorcycles. Now, bring on the comments. I know what you guys are going to say. Where's the DR650? Where's the DRZ400? Where's the, KLX300? I get it, but those are dual sport bikes. So I really wanted to limit this to just adventure bikes. So, larger, a little bit larger, heavier, more carrying capacity, more long distance ability. Yes, I know you can buy a dual sport bike and put luggage on it, but you're going to have an uncomfortable seat, you're going to have no wind protection, you're going to have a tiny fuel tank in most cases. You're going to have to do all those upgrades, and that's just not something that a lot of beginners are looking to do. Now, I can do more videos about dual sport bikes, but again, this was really limited to what I define as like more typical adventure touring bikes, so please understand that. Now, what have I missed? What do you guys think are the best beginner level adventure bikes for 2022? I'm really curious to know your feedback and your thoughts on that, so please put that below in the comments. I just want to say thank you so much for being part of this community. It means a lot. Really love going on this journey with all of you. Please ride safe out there. Until next time, we'll see you out there.